Why do you miss someone? Who hurt you? Someone who made you feel small, unimportant, confused, maybe even broken. And yet, you still think about them. You still replay moments in your head. You still feel something when their name appears. And sometimes, you even wish they would come back, even though you know they hurt you. That contradiction doesn't make sense, at least not logically. Because if someone caused you pain, your mind should want distance. It should want protection. It should want to move on. But that's not what happens. Instead, your mind goes back, again, and again, and again. So what's really going on? Why does your brain hold on to someone who wasn't good for you? The answer isn't simple, but it's not random either, because your brain is not reacting to the person, it's reacting to something deeper, something more subtle, something much harder to let go of. You're not just missing them, you're missing a feeling your brain became attached to. Because when you were with them, there were moments that felt real, moments that felt intense, moments that made everything else disappear. And your brain remembers those moments, not the full reality, just the highlights. That's how memory works. It doesn't replay everything equally. It selects, it edits, it filters. And most of the time, it keeps what felt strongest, what felt most emotional, what felt meaningful, even if those moments were rare, even if they were inconsistent, even if they were surrounded by pain. Because your brain is not objective, it's emotional. And emotion distorts memory. It reshapes the past. It softens what hurt and amplifies what felt good. So when you think about them, you're not remembering the whole story. You're remembering a version of it, a curated version, one that makes it harder to let go. And that's where it becomes dangerous. Because your brain starts to create a narrative, a story that feels real but isn't complete. You start thinking, it wasn't that bad. They had good moments. Maybe things could have been different. And slowly, the pain becomes less clear. But the attachment stays strong. And then something else happens. Something even more powerful, something that turns attachment into something close to addiction. Because the relationship wasn't consistent. Sometimes they cared, sometimes they didn't, sometimes they were present, sometimes they pulled away. And that inconsistency is what made it addictive. Because your brain loves patterns it can't predict. It becomes obsessed with trying to understand them, trying to solve them, trying to fix them. Every time they gave you attention, it felt like a reward. And every time they pulled away, it created tension. And that tension made the reward feel even stronger. Because you didn't know when it would come again. And that uncertainty is one of the most powerful psychological triggers that exists. It's the same mechanism behind gambling. You don't know when you'll win, but that's exactly what keeps you playing. And in this case, you didn't know when they would care again. But that's what kept you attached. Because your brain started chasing that feeling, that moment of connection, that moment of closeness, That moment where everything felt okay. And over time, that chase became a loop, a pattern, something your brain learned to repeat, not because it was healthy, but because it was intense. And intensity often feels like meaning, even when it isn't. And that's the trap, because your brain confuses emotional intensity with emotional value. Just because something felt strong doesn't mean it was good for you. But your brain doesn't make that distinction. It just remembers. This felt important. And anything that feels important is hard to let go. But there's another layer, something even deeper. Because when you were with that person, you didn't just experience them. You experienced a version of yourself, a version of you that felt different, maybe more alive, more emotional, more connected, more seen. Even if it wasn't consistent, even if it wasn't stable, there were moments where it felt real. And your brain holds on to that too, because now it's not just about missing them. It's about missing who you were, when you were with them. And that makes it even harder, because it feels like you lost something inside yourself, not just someone. And that kind of loss doesn't fade easily. It stays, it echoes, it lingers in the background. And your brain tries to return to it, tries to recreate it, even if it knows it won't be the same. But here's where it gets even more complicated. Because missing someone doesn't always mean you want them back. It doesn't always mean they were right for you. It doesn't even mean you're still in love. Sometimes it just means your brain hasn't let go yet. Because your brain doesn't process emotional loss instantly. It doesn't close chapters cleanly. It lingers, it replays, it revisits, especially when something feels unfinished. And most painful relationships don't end with clarity. They end with questions, with confusion, with things left unsaid. And your brain hates that. It hates uncertainty. It hates incomplete stories. So it keeps going back, trying to understand, trying to make sense of it, trying to find an ending that feels satisfying. But it never finds it, because the answers aren't in the past. They're in your interpretation of it. And that's why you keep thinking about them. Not because you need them, but because your brain is still trying to resolve something emotional, something internal. And at the same time, there's another force at play, something quieter, but just as powerful. Habit, because you didn't just connect with that person emotionally. You built patterns around them. You got used to their presence, their messages, their attention, their energy. And when that disappears, your brain notices. It feels the absence. It feels the silence. And it doesn't like it, because your brain prefers familiarity, even if that familiarity wasn't good for you. Because what's familiar feels safe, even when it isn't. And what's unfamiliar feels uncomfortable, even when it's better for you. So your brain pulls you back, not toward what's good, but toward what it recognizes. And that creates another loop. You think about them. You feel something. You revisit memories, and that keeps the connection alive, even when the relationship is gone. And over time, that loop becomes part of your identity. You start to associate certain emotions with that person, certain thoughts, certain patterns, and letting go feels like losing a part of yourself. But here's the truth. You're not missing them. You're missing a pattern your brain got used to. You're missing a feeling your brain learned to chase. You're missing a version of yourself that existed in that dynamic. And once you understand that, something shifts, because you stop idealizing the person and start understanding the mechanism. You start seeing the pattern instead of the illusion. And that awareness creates space, a space between the memory and your reaction to it. Because before, it felt automatic. Now, it becomes something you can observe, something you can question, something you can interrupt. And that's where change begins, not by forcing yourself to forget, not by pretending you don't care, but by understanding why you care. Because once you understand the pattern, you stop feeding it unconsciously. You stop reinforcing it. And slowly, it starts to weaken. The memories lose intensity. The emotional charge fades. The urge to revisit becomes less frequent. Not instantly, but gradually. And in that process, you regain something. Something you didn't realize you lost. Control. Not over your emotions, but over how you respond to them. And that changes everything, because missing someone is not the problem. It's a natural response. It's human. But staying stuck in that loop, that's what keeps you from moving forward. And the moment you see the loop, you're no longer trapped inside it. You're outside of it, watching it, understanding it. And that distance is what allows you to finally let go. Not because you forget, but because you no longer need to go back. Because you realize something important. Missing them doesn't mean they were right for you. It just means your brain hasn't caught up yet. And once it does, everything changes.